You're listening to the Physio Matters podcast in association with exerciseprescriber.com, and this is session 53. Welcome back to Physio Matters. I'm still Jack Chew, and I've got a few things to get you up to date with, and then we'll dive straight into what is a bumper episode that I know you're going to love. We've got some really exciting news. The first thing being we have launched the page for the conference. So we're doing a Reforming MSK Practice Conference, which is at the Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester, 5th and 6th of October. So that's a Friday, Saturday, and the tickets are on sale now, £250 for the full 2 days. We have a party on the Friday night, actually in the museum's foyer, which includes some food, some bands, and things like that. So it's going to be brilliant. Check out the ticket booking site, which is www.buytickets.at/reforming MSK. That's the most direct route to the ticket site, although you can also visit reform.physio and click through to events or /conference to find out more about it. Full program to be announced at a later date, but similarly we're gonna drip feed you this information. It's selling really well. I mean, do if you want to come along, and please get your tickets booked, because I can't imagine. I mean, we've got good amount of space. I mean, the reason we're doing it at this scale is because we know it's going to be popular, but at the moment I can't guarantee that they're going to be around for long. So do sign up as quickly as you can if you fancy it. Just a few examples of what we're going to be doing. There's a few things that it's not going to be. So you're not going to have your hundreds of posters to wade through. You're not going to have a trade stand area that you need to be wading through and looking at gadgets and gizmos. We're trying to clean things up and just have a quality program and great interaction. So we're saying it's the clinical conference with a conversational twist, and so we will be bringing it all together, Physio Matters style, for you. Lots of debates, lots of discussion, panels, etc. So a few examples that we put on the ticket website that I'll run through you. So we're going to have certain sessions. So we'll have reforming something. So we've got reforming exercise, for example. That's going to be led by Adrian Mcgregor as a keynote, but it'll be quite a short keynote. And then we'd sit him on a panel, for example, with people like Joe Gibson, Brad Neal, Paula Deacon, Adam Meekins. Then greasing the wheels of dialogue. We would then bring together some podcast-style questions to each of the panelists, and then fielding the audience for questions and comments, and getting you guys interacting as much as we can with topics like that. We also have a brilliant session called Reforming Patient Engagement, which is going to be led by Joletta Belton, who we're bringing over. And as this podcast states, we're really trying to make sure that the patient voice is front and centre in a process of reform, and giving us the reasons as to why we're doing that. So we're going to then sit her with fellow patients, educators and clinicians, discussing how we can learn from our past mistakes and successes to make sure that we bring things together sensibly and correctly. And then, for example, a reforming orthopedics session with sports and exercise medics, ESP physios debating triage and who should be at the front and centre of that role, surgical indication under scrutiny, and that's going to be with Roy Lilly, who's a health policy analyst. And so that'll be a sort of debate and discussion in and around that. So really trying to set the world to rights on it. We've got other sessions that we're in planning with, reforming manual therapy, reforming education. There's breakout workshops at least once each of the 2 days. We break out into smaller side rooms. So there's lots of different ways in which we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible. So we're extremely excited about that, as you can imagine. And again, the easiest way to find out more about that is to go to www.buytickets.at/reforming MSK, and that'll get you straight there. And as I say, get yourself signed up as soon as possible, because they are selling quickly, and we've not even told you guys on the podcast yet how to get there. So it's impressive that people are even finding those links on social media, etc. So do get those snapped up. If you haven't already seen it, then check out our Facebook page, where we took 2 live streams from the panel discussions at the last #TheBigRs event in Birmingham, which was a huge success. We did a 90-minute panel discussion and audience interaction on on reasoning, and then on to responsibility as well. Brilliant panelists on there, and thank you so much for everyone that got involved with that. Just to give you a clue as to who's been involved in this project so far and who's going to be speaking at the conference, just to reel off a few names: Joletta Bolton, Eric Mira, Joe Gibson, Roger Kerry, Naomi McVeigh, Karim Khan, Heather Watson, Paula Deacon, Brad Neal, Leslie Holsworth, Neil Langridge, Adam Meekins, Roy Lilly, and Martin Ongwen, all confirmed for the Reforming MSK Practice Conference with hashtag the big R's. So do check that out. You've always wanted a Physio Matters conference. Here it is. Let's see you in the room. If you want to know more about what we're getting up to with reform.physio, then check out reform.physio/community is going to be where we're then launching a Google Drive style library. We're working out exactly what is the best plug-in for the website on that, so we're probably going to need to design a members area. There's also going to be a forum to discuss all those sorts of issues, which I think is going to be really important for this movement and this message, and so we can make sure that we're as transparent as possible, so you'll be able to log into that and wade in with discussion, and also be able to access policy documents and guidelines likes of PGDs, or we're trying to make sure that we offer quality blueprints of practice for competency frameworks, etc. It's going to be a real go-to spot for us when we're all trying to collaborate and move things forward for the best of MSK practice. And of course those things will be discussed at length at the conference, but also on reform.physio/community is where you need to keep your eyes peeled for. So hope many of you wade in on there, and we're going to try and take what is the best of some of the social media platforms where we have interprofessional discussions, but trying to mitigate some of the worst of it. So reducing the anonymity, increase the accountability, and try to make sure we're pragmatic and moving towards solutions on certain issues that we all deem important. So very exciting times ahead for that. Anyway, today's podcast is incredibly exciting for us, and huge thanks as ever to exerciseprescriber.com for helping us to put episodes like this together, where we're trying to do something different, trying to do something new that we just think is the right thing, and exerciseprescriber.com have really helped us to do that, where they've supported us on whatever episodes we choose to put together, which is incredibly innovative and brave of them to do so. So I really thank them for that, because as I'll discuss with Adrian, who's one of our patients who's on the podcast today, he's had an incredible journey that I think is well worth telling you all about. And so to bring that forward to you guys is something that is only afforded by the support of companies like exerciseprescriber.com, and also those of you who support us on Patreon. So if you haven't already, check out Patreon if you want to throw us a few quid on a monthly basis to keep things like this going, if you think that these things are useful. Adrian's first appearance on physio platforms was also part of our hashtag Dear Student Me video, which is on Twitter and Facebook, which is basically a who's who of physios and patients and other professionals that are, if they could give the student selves a piece of advice, what would they do? What would they say? And so we've edited that into a video. It's only 9 minutes. Check that out on social media, and share that with especially new graduates and students, but also well worth having a little muse over ourselves. I certainly learned a lot from it, so we've edited that together. Hashtag Dear Student Me. And if you want to get involved, then what would you tell your student self is something that we're trying to get together on that hashtag, either with videos or on tweets and Facebook and Instagram and stuff. So yeah, check that out as well. Adrian's on the end of that, and you'll see why he's a really important voice in this space. So hope you really enjoyed this episode. I certainly did. And once again, thank you so much to Adrian and to exerciseprescriber.com for supporting what we're doing. All right, take care. I'll speak to you the other side. So very special today for us to be having what we're calling the Patient Matters podcast, and really interesting because we've often tried to bring this conversation to you, and there's been several patients of ours over the years that we thought have got really interesting stories, as many patients do, that we'd like to bring to you, but for various reasons that's not always appropriate. But we're very thankful today to be able to bring to you one of our patients that's got a story that's certainly worth telling, and certainly lots for us to learn from. I don't want to introduce him too much because of course he can do better so himself. But I want to first and foremost thank you so much for being here, Adrian, and would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, well, thank you, Jack, and welcome to your listeners. I was struggling, Jack, before I came up today to think why would your listeners be remotely interested in another pain story, because they probably do that daily listening to the patients, but hopefully you won't lose too many listeners at the end of this podcast. I could also say I'm a plant by other people who do podcasts to bore the hell out of your listeners, so you lose some of your legion of fans. But yeah, my name is Adrian Mcgregor. I'm 53 years of age. I was a Royal Marine for 5 years, and I left the Royal Marines in 1986 and joined the fire service in 1987 and left 2015. So I've had two biggish careers. So I'm officially retired from the fire service. I'm a patient of yours, Jack. Yeah, and I'm sure there'll be lots of other details that will be teased out during this conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
So stick with it, I say.
Yeah, good. No, and I think that the funny thing is, yeah, you're humbly suggesting that you might be considered a plant by other podcasters as a rivalry. I think we're going to get people suggesting that you're a plant by us, and we'll come to some of the reasons why as they come out. But a patient of ours currently, but also a user of physiotherapy services for several years now, and experienced the profession in various different ways, in various guises over time. So that's one of the reasons why, just to answer the question directly as to why I think that your story is going to be very interesting for the listenership and beyond. So thank you once again for your time. And I've got to say as well, as I alluded to in the introduction, the bravery for doing so, because it does take a lot to come on these things. It goes out to a wide audience, and unfortunately some patients have understandably and totally forgivably not wanted necessarily to share their story in the detail that you're willing to today. So
yeah, part of my rehabilitation, and I'm sure we'll talk about all the different things I've tried, has been about kind of losing the anger towards pain and developing certain compassionate behaviours, and giving things back. And I suppose if there was one message that I'd want to put out, is that, you know, through the journey that I've taken, to give something back, to give back to your industry, physiotherapy, and also people who are in pain. So that's important to me.
So I think we needn't keep alluding to it. We can simply then give you the floor to tell your story from the top, starting from wherever you like, really.
I'll start from perhaps the age of 16. At the age of 16, I joined the Royal Marines. So by the age of 16, I'd already completed the commando course, the Royal Marine Commando course, and I'm sure there's physiotherapists or others listening to this would probably know how difficult that is. At the time, I probably didn't think it was that difficult. It's just, as a 16-year-old, you're very adaptable. There's a relevance to that, and if I flick back to where we are now in terms of a patient and a patient suffering from pain, and the fact that, you know, these key parts of the bio-psycho-social model, early exposure to stresses at a young age, at 16 doing the commando course, these may plant a seed for future events in life. And if you can follow my thread later, you'll see what I'm trying to refer to. So at the age of 16, I've done the commando course. Even at the age of 16, I'd already started to be exposed to some life-changing events. Minor injuries. Early days, I'd kind of suffered concussion, fractures, all minor stuff. At the age of 16, I was caught up in a grenade explosion, suffering minor injuries. My life was saved by another Royal Marine, and he got the Queen's Commendation for bravery for all that. So again, why am I saying this? Do all these things link to future things that's going to happen in my life? So then my career moves on as a Royal Marine, serving in various parts of the world, doing different things, which I won't go into too much. By the age of 21, I've left the Royal Marines and I've joined the fire service, and then I went on to have a very successful career as a firefighter. Again, being injured a lot, but more importantly, being exposed to stressful events, things that shape you as a person and things that may shape the rest of your life. Again, did I worry about them too much during that career? Well, no, you just get on with it. It's just shit that happens. The life-changing event for me was my injury, and that happened in about the year 2000. I was a breathing apparatus wearer at a factory fire in a place called Bloxwich, which is in the West Midlands. And unfortunately, after we'd put the fire out, I fell through a concrete floor. Basically, the occupiers of the factory had cut a hole in the floor to use a forklift to put a piece of machinery up onto the first floor. So There was just a hole there. We didn't get any warning that this hole was there, because you wouldn't expect a hole to be in a concrete floor, would you? And after we put the fire out, with my partner, who was in there as well, we was ventilating, which means opening windows. And I took one step forward and just felt myself as if I was in a lift. A lift, you know, where you suddenly get that inertia and you're falling. I knew I was falling because I was almost thinking, you know, counting the seconds, 1, 2, then smack, I hit the floor. Now thinking I'm wearing a breathing apparatus set as well, so I've almost got the weight of a child on my back. When I fell, I knew I'd done some damage because I'd got that awful feeling that I just couldn't move. And cut a long story short, I was rescued. They got me out, but I'd suffered quite severe fractures to my leg. I'd injured my back, but majority of my injuries are my right hand side. I went on to have lots of surgery from, I had a compound fracture, I had a fractured fib and tib, my ankle was dislocated. I didn't suffer too heavily trauma-wise from my back, but I did started to notice in the year 2000 niggly back pain. So I was having surgery. I went on to have about 7 operations on my leg, but I did start to know niggly back pain. So my career continues in and out of hospital, and I just steadily rise through the ranks in the fire service. And as I did, it was becoming a little bit more stressful, as it does. The weight on my shoulders and the expectations was greater. Cast your mind then forward to 2012, and I did notice that the back pain was just slightly getting a bit worse, and started to feel kind of, and I'm using language that I now know, I wouldn't back then obviously because I didn't have a clue what radiated pain meant, but I felt this little tingling down my right hand side, and part of the training requirements for a firefighter is that we regularly enter competitions, and we have one competition called a breathing apparatus competition where a team will go through a fictitious incident. There's a fire in a house, so with set light to the house fire, and they'll put simulated casualties, dummies in different parts of the house, and a fire engine or a fire appliance will turn up, and it's a timer to see how many you can rescue and put the fire out. And it's all a competition, procedures and time, etc. So I entered along with my team this competition, again as a breathing apparatus wearer, and I came out of the house, and for some reason the pain switch had just gone into super high. I was doubled up in pain outside. When I took the breathing apparatus set off, I couldn't straighten up, and yeah, the pain was severe. And I know you've kind of been through this sort of back pain before, so in terms of the scale of the pain, it was pretty relentless. Then went through the normal, go to the doctor, back pain. I probably was referred for some physio at the time, back in 2012. NHS physio, didn't seem to do too much, it didn't help. I was referred for an MRI scan, and again using my old language, I wouldn't have had a clue what an MRI scan should show, will show. If whatever the report said when it come back, I took it as at face value. So if the MRI scan came back as, degenerative changes at L4, L5 and L5S1, large prolapse at L5S1, sounds really bad to me, that does. Especially when it's in black and white and you can see a report, and then go back to your GP, and he then painted a slightly gloomy picture to me, which was the same sort of words, same language. So I think going back then, the things were starting to happen in my mind where it was already bad. The language in the picture that was being portrayed was bad. And he suggested that I be referred to a surgeon. Within a few months, I've gone in for a discectomy on L5S1, and I then start my 6 weeks rehabilitation before I then go back to work on light duties. It did seem to to work, and the radiated pain seemed to be less after surgery. So the sort of things I couldn't do before, I couldn't sit. Anytime I went into flexion, it was very, very painful, and I seemed to kind of knock a hole in that. I did notice some improvement, and I carried on with 6 weeks rehabilitation, and then went back to work, but still noticed a niggling back pain, which was disappointing because I thought, magic wand, it'll get rid of all this. And I've not been on any journey of discovery where I did any research myself to see what, consequences of surgery, what were the risks. I remember filling a form in as a patient to say, sign here, these are the risks, you might die, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really pay too much attention because, hey, as a patient, you want one thing. I want to be pain-free. Please get rid of this pain. And if a surgeon is saying, I could perhaps... You're in a window of opportunity for me to help you with that ridiculous pain. You take it. I'd only been back work a couple of weeks, and whilst I'd still got the back pain, I noticed that I was starting to have very bad pains in my fingers, my hand, my arm, my shoulder on the right-hand side. And I thought, this can't be anything possibly to do with my lower back. And I'd have to say the pain was even worse than the lower back. Very, very painful. Couldn't sleep. Again, went back to the doctor. Doctor. Why am I suddenly having this pain in my neck? Went for an MRI scan. And there was a prolapse at the C7, C6, C7 area of my neck, which was really impinging on the nerves down that right-hand side. And as you can imagine, my kind of life started to fall apart. So I thought, is this my whole spine going? Because I'd never had exposure to someone who could sit down and temper my thoughts or put it into perspective.
Right.
Referred back to see a surgeon, same surgeon who did my lower back, and thankfully it was just leave it. We're not doing any surgery. Hopefully it'll settle down. Try a few exercises. And luckily I never had any surgery on the neck. I got back to work as normal, carried on, and the back pain, where I'd had the original discectomy, there was no improvement, so I went back to the surgery, and in 2014 I had a reversion, where they basically, following an MRI scan, noticed that the disc had come out again. And so therefore he did a second discectomy on that same disc.
This time for back pain more than leg
Ridiculous pain, yeah. Because from a patient perspective, and this could be any issue, language I'm sure it'll crop up again, it was never explained to me that, I just thought back pain was back pain. What I didn't understand was that the back surgery could fix the ridiculous pain because of it impinging on the nerve, but back pain per se probably wouldn't be successful for back pain, wherever that's caused by. And again, I don't want to sound like an idiot talking here, but
no, not at all.
I didn't know. I thought the back pain was being caused by the back, by the disc, by the prolapse, by the nerve irritation, by the scar tissue, and etc. A mechanical thing, as opposed to pain from anywhere else. We're going back to the days where if somebody had said to me, the pain might not be coming from anywhere near there, Adrian, it might be coming from your head or wherever, I probably would have wanted to hit them all.
Yeah.
So it was now separated. There's the ridiculous pain and there's the pure back pain. I can't do anything for your back pain. And it was like, well, what can be done for the back pain then? And then this is where I start to go down another path of chronic pain management, the chronic pain clinic, the GP, offering all the sort of antidote for pain, which, as you're well aware of, is the low-level stuff, paracetamol, right up through the morphine patches, and in between there you've got your gabapentins and your pregabalins. So I tried them all of them. Very medicine focused, because again, I'm listening to experts. I didn't know what I know now in terms of questioning any of that. GP referral, 5 minutes, medicine. It's refer you to a pain clinic. At no point was, and this is not bashing anybody, I wouldn't want to do that, wanting to throw anybody from the medical community under the bus, but CBT, other forms of pain management, mindfulness, and all them tools was never mentioned. The mind-body connection to pain, never mentioned. Nobody was helping me or talking to me at all about pain. I can't remember any of that. Nobody ever explained to me the association between, surgery. One of the risks from surgery is that you might go on to develop chronic pain, because if they did at the time, I probably would have said, run that one by me again. How does that work then? Why would having surgery cause chronic pain? But that is what happened, and obviously, you can't turn back the clock, I wouldn't know where pain originated from anyway. Why would I?
Sure.
So that takes me up to the decision to retire me on medical grounds in the fire service, because then I've had 2 spinal surgeries. I then had to have a shoulder surgery. Everything was on the right-hand side, and again, I used to put everything down to the fact, well, it's all on my right-hand side. It's got to be due to that fall,
sure,
where I was physically damaged. It's a mechanical thing. Why would it all be on the right-hand side? Because that's what a patient does. A patient will make up his own stories if he can't find the true facts, or he's not having it explained to him by people who should know better. So in 2015, I was medically retired from the fire service due to these injuries, and and a big thank you to Westminster Fire Service who did look after me, and I've been retired really since 2013, and I started my own journey of discovery after I refused to go down a path of passive care. I didn't want, even back then I knew that the implications of taking the medication wouldn't be good. And luckily I had some skills, some self-awareness to find out myself about trying to fix my own pain. So I would have started research, going back into 2015 to look on the internet, casting my net really wide, back pain, and looking at all the sort of experts out there to see if I could find the holy grail, really, a person or a thing that could help me. Even should I be exercising? That question, best exercise for back pain. So my journey would have started with that very simplistic, is it okay to exercise while you've got back pain?
Yeah.
Very simple.
If we can punctuate just there for a second, just to make sure that I've not missed anything, is there anything up to this point with regards to your care, be that physiotherapy or otherwise, that has gone unmentioned? Because you've mentioned a few things that haven't been tried at that point. And I know where this is going, so of course it's going to be lots we could then discuss, and the journey only gets more interesting, doesn't it? But is there anything else that's been tried up to that point?
Yeah, I did have physiotherapy, but it would be NHS based, because again, back in them days, I wouldn't have thought of seeking out a person who's very specific in chronic back pain. I just went with the flow, as most patients would do.
Sure.
It's trust. You just go with the flow. So I would have had physio, and again, not wishing to bash anybody, they probably would have been doing a fantastic job. But I do remember the very basic assessment of me at the time. Again, knowing what I know now, and there weren't probably much conversation. it was a couple of tests, and I still remember the tests were, the typical straight leg raise. This was before surgery and then after, when I was deciding whether to have the second lot surgery. Sure. I was allocated 6 sessions. I think that's all you're allowed, 6 sessions. Probably been very quick. I probably didn't criticise us at the time because I thought that was probably a great service. And as we'll come on to later, the effect that when physios themselves are, I suppose, burdened with a conveyor belt of patients all day, what do you expect? And that weren't successful. I did every exercise that they asked me to do.
And is that what it did entail? Is that what it did entail in terms of treatment? Was it specific exercise based?
Yes, it was exercise. It was nothing more. And why would I be shocked that I weren't getting anything else but exercise? If I'd have come out of there and not got any exercises to do, I'd have thought, well, what's a physio supposed to do? If he'd have sat, or she'd have sat at the side of me and started talking about, neuroplasticity and pain and, chronic pain, how it develops, and the fact that you might not have any physical injury, I probably would have walked out anyway.
Right.
I've had chiropractor several times up until that point, and the chiropractors range from the acupuncture to the manual manipulation, and I must have had 6 to 10 sessions. I paid for it myself.
Sure.
Again, none of it worked. So trying some of these other modalities, I almost did it as a tick box exercise, Jack, because I knew that if I later went for surgery again, in my naivety thinking that surgery, do everything they want, tick all the boxes, then when you go and speak to the surgeon, he'll say, yeah, you've tried everything else, you've had the medication, well, I'll look again at you. I'd have loved it if some of it did work, but by then I was starting to think, I'm still in pain every day, I've had the surgery, this does not feel right. Running parallel with them active treatments that I'm trying, I completely stripped my diet. I saw advice from a nutritionist in America, and I thought maybe I was starting to understand now about the lifestyle issues that might be linked to pain.
Right.
So I'm doing a little bit of learning. So I went for various tests. I had comprehensive profiles taken of my hormones, stool samples, blah de blah, which then led me up to probably where you're going to go next is when I first hit my first exposure to back experts. So I've had physio, I've had chiro, completely changed my diet. I thought I was doing the right exercises, although I'd got nobody to run it by because I'm on my own at the moment trying to do this myself. And again, I'm sure we'll come on to it later that you can't do it on your own.
Yeah, and that's where obviously I wound it back just to make sure that we hadn't missed anything in that part. But you then were in this, and it's a great question that lingered, and where should I be exercising? If so, what should I be doing? Then going on this self-seeking process to try to understand in the era of being able to do that at your fingertips. The journey doesn't clean up or tidy up at that point, though, does it? So let's just go from there. What did you encounter?
Well, after that second operation in 2014, and I'd had my shoulder repaired, I'd kind of left Westminster Fire Service. Just before I locked into back specialists, I sought help from the mobility ward, the Kelly Starrett, which I'm sure some of your listeners know of him and mobility ward. And I reached out to mobility ward, and I was helped by one of the physios there, Dr. Roop Sahota. So he works with them, and it was via Skype, obviously. So naively again, he would have to assess me via Skype, them to give me the prescription of what's the matter with them, because in them early days, I self-diagnosed myself that it's probably because you're very tight down below, because you've been guarded, and the way you're sitting and the way you're moving, that it's a biomechanical issue, and you need to either unlock something or strengthen something.
Right.
I mean, let's talk about psoas, let's talk about piriformis,
Right.
let's talk about gluteal inhibition, let's talk about hamstrings.
So the faulty biomechanics on faulty structures we're at this point.
Yeah, and this is the way I thought.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I've got the supple leopard, and I'm going through it like a dose of salt, and I've got the bands, and I'm stretching, and I'm doing all that, and I think, I'll tell you what, I'll put my hand in my pocket, and I'll actually get the experts to have a look. And before I know it, I'm doing banded exercises, and I'm doing couch stretch for the different parts of my body. I'm doing ankle, because obviously I put two and two together that because I'd had so much surgery on that leg, I've got limited mobility in the ankle, and I know I have, and I know you've seen that my ankle, my right ankle, actually is very limited because of the various amounts of surgery I've had in it.
Yeah, well, that's
so I thought I'd try and fix myself on the old Kelly Starrett stuff.
Right.
So tried that for a while, still in the same amount of pain. My mobility was fabulous, but I was a supple leopard.
Right.
Still in pain.
Sure.
Still in pain.
Okay.
So I'm on to my next path. And then I come across the great work of Dr. Stuart Miguel. And I say great work because as a patient, it's almost as if you found the Holy Grail. Right. The world-renowned back expert that perhaps could offer me a glimmer of hope with this back pain. So I start looking at the videos, and I get more and more interested in some of the things that's been said. And I hook into these sort of the terminology around spine hygiene and flexion intolerant or flexion intolerance. And I thought, you know what, flexion intolerance, that's got to be me. Because every time I sat down, any time I was in flexion, it was very, very painful still. Right. So it resonated with me.
So from mobility WOD to stability WOD in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what then? What was it about those things that were being said that felt different enough, but also still resonated with your self-perception at the time? And how much are you carrying into the consultations, and how much is that coming from the model, the framework, the individuals within it, which I know is hard to separate, but can you reflect on that?
Yeah, I think, when it's not the label of who the person is, although to a certain extent, and when you're in persistent pain, and I'll keep choosing the language here, but chronic pain, persistent pain, it's the same thing to me. You look for anything to get you out of it, because by now, Jack, you've got to realise that pain is having an impact on everything else in your life. I just retired from a career in as a Royal Marine and as a firefighter. You want to kind of move on in your life, and you're in the pain cave.
Right.
You want to get out of it so you can crack on with your life. So you're thinking, this has just got the hallmarks of, expert, loads of science, loads of research. I might use the wrong word here, but Godiva research, it's been tested on things. Yeah. High profile people, good results, blah blah blah, and the fact that if you straight jacketed this corset around your midriff, as in the TVA and the obliques and the erectors at the back, you've got this corset. Yeah. If you can get that super stabilised, it'll stop little micro movements. And I thought, well, that's what it must be. It must be the fact that, I'm moving sloppily. So if I can tidy it with spine hygiene and get it, stabilised, walking, sitting, lifting, it might get rid of my pain, stop the micro movements. That's what I wanted to do.
And so that's what the core... I actually use that.
Did you just say core?
The core message
I
regarding...
said TVA. I'm like the lay person patient. And you say core?
But I wasn't meaning core in that regard. I was actually meaning the core...
You're going to edit this, aren't you?
No, I don't want to edit that bit, because it's funny, it's a Freudian slip, because I was meaning the core message within...
Oh, yeah, good one, Jack.
Sliding off it. Yeah, the core message within spinal hygiene was the reducing the micro movement. Yeah. That's something, just in case our listenership aren't necessarily familiar with that. Can you describe what that meant to you then? What did they mean by micro movements? Micro movements of what?
Well, there's the message at the time, and there's a message now. Well, let me give you the message now. The message now was that it just brought total fear, and almost a reluctance to move normally.
Right.
Because you've got to keep so tight and so sharp on these this spine hygiene. Back then it was, I'll do anything to stop it. So it meant to me back then, I know I keep flitting.
No, that's right.
And it meant to me then, everything you do, from cleaning your teeth to getting off the toilet to picking something up, whether that be a pencil or whether it be, whatever, will now have to change. Life will have to change, even the way you get out of bed. And I do believe that we're perhaps going to be doing a video where I can show you some of this.
Yeah, some of this is easier to model in video, so we're going to accompany it with some clips of, because you've become a great actor of this, because you've retained the movement patterns that you had at these various stages, which I think we'll be able to demonstrate.
And again at that time I was also exposed to, via my own reading and my research, to DNS. The dynamic neuromuscular stabilisation. You're obviously familiar with that, yeah. And I thought, it's very similar to the DNS stuff. How the baby from birth then will go as on 2 or 4s, and then eventually it'll go into like crawling pattern to a bear movement, then stood up. And I thought, well, this kind of makes sense here. So I was almost thinking that. And where we started the conversation is this 16-year-old Royal Marine, and how that changed my life. You're almost talking to the converted who will, you give me the exercise, I'll do it.
Right, yeah.
And again, for your listeners, they also have to be aware that some of their patients, particularly the ex-military type, they come with a set of beliefs and a way of doing things that perhaps are creating some of the issues, the pain issues. For example, that very disciplined, direct approach to doing the exercises and searching for the answer might need to be unbroken a little bit. So whatever I was told to do, I'd do it, and a few more as well.
Sure. Yeah. And so then we're in the midst of it. You'd found what you thought might be, once again, that this felt even stronger, that it could well be the answer, and you committed, as you're describing, in full. And so what was the sort of the what was involved in that part of the journey? How long did it go on for? What was suggested within that? Because that's almost a chapter in itself.
Yeah, well, I did reach out to Professor Miguel, and very graciously, responded back to me, and I would have liked to have seen Stuart Miguel. Obviously, he was based in Canada, and it would be very difficult. But he offered me, he recommended a name to me of somebody who practices his ways of working, and they was in London. And I then reached out to that person in London, and it involved me going down there, and I went through the full 3-hour, it was about 3 hours assessment, very comprehensive, looked at all my, talked to me. There was for the first time, Jack, there was a long conversation.
Yeah.
And I started to feel a lot better that, this person was listening to me. We did a thorough assessment. I took my MRI. I'd already sent my MRI scans anyway. You could already see that, what was portrayed in the MRI report. And from that assessment, then it was then moving on to the stabilisation exercises and how this grooving patterns.
Sure.
I started to have to groove new motor patterns, and these motor patterns were the stabilisation exercises, and they are the first phase before you move on to I suppose the ultimate back strength exercises. You've got to groove these stabilisation exercises.
So grooving being you're moving wrong, for want of a better term, and you need to embed new movement patterns, new motor behaviours that are correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the I suppose the what's the word? The checkpoint for moving on to that is that you're pain free. So you don't move away from the stabilisation until your pain is free. So you wait for something to settle down. Well, mine never settled down.
So at this point you're planking till your heart's content. Yeah?
Well, it's not so much the plank. I mean, if anybody has not read it, it's a very good book. I think it's a very good book. Again, depending on the reader's context that he puts to that book, is the back mechanic. And it shows you these exercises. You can go on YouTube videos. There are lots of alternatives to them exercises as well. So you build it up, and you build up using techniques such as like a Russian pyramid, where you're dropping the intensity, on the old fit model.
Yeah.
You're building up endurance, because in terms of the fast twitch, slow twitch, you're looking for endurance. It's not straight power. And you need the endurance for, guess what? For the spine hygiene all day, don't you? So you're being asked to build up endurance. All makes absolute perfect sense at the time.
Right.
Perfect sense. And I build up, and I regularly go and see, the guy in London, and I'm passing all the checkpoints with honours. If it was like gold star time, I'd be full of them. Like you're going to McDonald's and you see the old, I'd have like 3 badges full of gold stars.
Yeah.
I was that good.
Did that, just out of interest, did that feed into your military and firefighter, the military man and the firefighter in you, in a sense that you were hitting checkpoints and acquiring sort of respected milestones of a sort, that then potentially you felt that you were on a journey towards the unlocking this problem?
Yeah, of course, because in terms of the feel-good factor from, I'm doing this myself, I'm doing it on my own, I'm achieving. I've not fallen back into, I've got a morphine patch on my arm, I'm not going to get up, I'm just going to lie in bed, I'm going to feel sorry for myself, I can never exercise again, I have lost the will to live. So I was starting to think, what, I might be able to get my life back here, I might be able to move forward in life. So whilst I could see that I was achieving the milestones, I've got to say this joke again, Jack, because I said it to you before. The scene from Rocky 3?
Yeah.
So Rocky 3, you've got Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa. They're sprinting on the... Yeah. And you look at Sylvester Stallone, he's looking tremendous, his abs, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's how I looked.
Yeah.
He's like... Because don't forget my diet now, I'd totally reform that. But I didn't give a monkeys because I was still in pain.
It still hurt?
It still hurt, yeah. So as I progressed then, I decided that I've passed my checkpoints myself. I'm still in pain, but I need to build it up. I need to do more exercise, but I need to kind of move it forward now, because my brain and my body is saying that it's not making it any worse, but I've still got it, so I want to do more. So I started to do more exercises under his guidance, and I started then to be able to push things.
So you told me
things.
at that point, you said that, from what I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, you tell this funny story where you demonstrated your bird dog exercise at one of your appointments, so that down in London as well, and they said that is, what did they say?
The best bird dog we've ever seen.
And he went and fetched someone else to come and...
Yeah.
So they were admiring that, and they were sort of thinking that though the rules were that these things needed to be pain-free in order to move on, you were at such a standard that they thought they sort of bent the rules a little bit, did they, at that point?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is to do with this test of, before you move on to the next phase, is that you've got to demonstrate that you've built up sufficient endurance.
Yeah.
And once you have built up, and I've seen this on other providers of kind of fix your own back physios, particularly in America. I don't know if you follow any of them, but they use the same sort of checkpoint measurement. What gets measured, and you've got the curl up, the bird dog, and for the obliques. I'll come back to it in a minute.
Yeah, no bother.
But there's the three main exercises, and you've got to pass the test before you kind of move on to the next phase. They all use it, but again, it was, well, what if I passed it and I'm still in pain? And at the time, I couldn't come to terms with that.
Did that appear to confuse them too at all? Or I'm just trying to work out how, can you bring us into that room a little bit so that you were surprised, you're demonstrating their milestones, you're telling them that it still hurts. Were they squaring that circle at all, or were they stretching that?
Yeah, and again, this is going back to my old world, which was when they've looked at my MRI scan, the language is such that yours is a really well-worn back. Your back's done a lot.
Right.
This is the language that's been portrayed to me. Your back is already self-fusing at L4, L5 because the disc space is so narrow. So the link was, well, you got a really bad back.
So they were suggesting there's an upper limit to what these things can achieve.
You might always have it.
Right, okay.
But at no point then, and again, anybody in the medical profession that I was exposed to, nobody ever explained to me about pain. What pain? I mean, naively, pain. I whack my finger, with a hammer. I'm gonna be in pain. Well, that's the only type of pain, isn't it? I have a headache. I'm in pain. I've got back pain. It's all the same pain, isn't it?
Sure. So as a concept, you felt it wasn't. You hadn't ever thought of it as being something broad, something complex.
Why would I want to know anything else about pain besides, look at that disc. Look at the degenerative changes. Look at the changes on the facet joints. Look at that bulge that's going into the dura, and it's touching this, and then the nerve. Blah blah. We've operated on you. It's created scar tissue. What do you expect?
Okay.
So I just had a very gloomy picture painted about my back, and I associated the fact that that's why you're still hurting, but it won't stop you moving on to the next phase. And the next phase is you can do some more exercises. But the dilemma was, what exercise and what's my prescription? How much can I do?
Okay.
I've searched wide for that answer, But what I was starting to come to terms with is, there's a link to the brain on pain. I started to do some research on that. Pain might come from the brain. So then that took me on to looking at the work of the neuroplastics guys, Michael Moscovich and the Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changed Itself.
Yeah.
They were some of my early go-to texts, particularly the book, and going onto the website, which started to look at chronic pain and the association of the brain and all these different parts of the brain. So the pleasure circuits and the pain circuits, they're all the same sort of thing. I mean, I'm explaining it to you as if...
No, yeah, that's good. Did you come across that stuff just from... I'm just wondering if these chapters are distinct, which of course I know they're not directly, but I mean, when you had this, you're in this process where the McGill-based stability work is not yielding results. Was there a moment where you were like, well, that needs to now be filed under failed interventions? Although, like you've admitted, it certainly moved you on from the, like you said, morphine patch in bed. It sort of made you feel like you were engaging more actively in a process, but then you were realising it wasn't yielding the results.
Yeah. In terms of the what I've come to be known as self-efficacy for me as a person,
right.
It really did help me. Because what it did was it got me into moving and knowing that it was okay to move. Now, whether it's called stabilisation exercise or whatever, it brought me on. It took me from the dark place, the pain cave, into, well, you're still in the pain cave, but I tell you what, there's a way of getting out of here.
You're doing something.
Okay. So, I can only thank that first stage of my movement. And I think at the time, as you're looking at different videos on back pain, I suddenly like to compare and contrast experts. This is what I'm about. If I was to say one of my strengths is, if Jack Chew's got a particular view on so and so, and that's what led me to you anyway, where I want someone who's got a different view to that, and then what I'm doing is I'm going to compare and contrast 3 or 4 experts to see if they've got any consensus on an issue. And if they've got consensus, I think that pretty much makes sense to me.
Okay.
So then I started to notice that 2 or 3 individuals around the world were all singing off the same hymn sheet about chronic pain, persistent pain. And, Sullivan's, we've got the Noy group.
Yeah.
People in Australia. We're all talking about this. Some were talking about this CFT model.
The cognitive
functional therapy model.
Peter Sullivan's work,
and the David Butler stroke Professor Lorimer Mosley were talking about the same sort of thing, but they was explaining it in a I always call it the Janet and John method. Quite simple to understand.
Sure.
And it talked about the pain, the brain in pain, which would have led me to the Norman Doidge and the Neuroplastics website, Michael Moscovich. And I started to get really into neuroplasticity.
Okay.
I tried to kind of really go into that in big style to see, the brain created pain, it can also undo it through neuroplasticity.
And this is the first time you've zoomed away from the back.
Yeah, I've zoomed away from the back, and I started to. I wanted to put a link between the two. I wanted to try and see where I've been injured.
Right.
It might be sensitised. So why is the signal still being sent up to the brain, and the brain's going, alarm, 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 pain, pain, pain? Is it an exercise I'm still doing that's triggering it? Is it my thoughts? Is it a memory? Why is it that every time I sit in my car, the pain was worse? Oh, is that anything to do with, because some of the most horrendous pain I had for about 6 months was when I was in Flexion sitting down? Might be. So, smells, sights, sounds, what have they got to do with pain? Well, as I later found out, they got quite a lot to do with pain.
Yeah.
I also at that time discovered great website Brain HQ, which is the brain games. And again, if some of your listeners have never heard of Brain HQ, I go on there daily. And it was a way of using different parts of your brain now to, you might say the distraction activities, but equally they're reinforcing some of the old pathways that are probably lost. While you're sitting feeling sorry for yourself, etc. And then start to do pleasurable activities as well. So at that time, I probably would have been reminded that, hey, you don't go out anymore. You're not doing anything. All you're doing is whinging and moaning and talking about pain. Nobody wants to listen anymore. So I'm starting to really change a lot of how I approach pain, as well as all this looking for stuff. I made contact with a physio who deals with CFT, and they was in Birmingham, Sarah Duncton. I'm sure it's Sarah Duncton, and she'd been trained in CFT in the approach. I thought I'll try a bit of this CFT. Right. So I went to Birmingham, and that was in 2016. She was good in the sense of, and the conversation went something like this. She'd already spotted, even when I was in reception, I didn't know. She was clocking how I was sitting. Because when I went in and we started the conversation, she was like really stripping me about, well, why you sat like that? And I was sat like in the old regimented, spine hygiene, sitting up straight.
Yeah, so you're bolt upright at this point.
And then she starts to say, well, why are you sat like that? Well, I need to kind of spine hygiene. I need to reinforce this. She said, stand up. So I stood up. She says, right, just flop forward and just let yourself go. Let it all go. I thought, this is a good physio session, this is. So I flopped forward. She says, how does it feel? I said, it feels great. So why don't you do it more often then? I thought, I don't know. Because I've been taught to move in a specific way.
Sure.
Because it might be a pain trigger, spine hygiene. Anyway, you know the approach that she was trying to teach me. She was losing the guarded approach.
Sure. So the shackles started to come off your movement, right? So you started to then not be moving in as rigid a way, and started to then reconceptualize what movement could be, and starting to redefine ways in which you'd move. What did that then lead you towards in pursuit of? And at that point, was there then? Are we still in a situation where what you worked on there, with that physiotherapist under a CFT guise, was that another? This might be the chapter.
Yeah, silver bullet. Yeah.
So we're still in a sense. It is still. Wow. Okay, this journey's got a new chapter here, but could this be the silver bullet where if I regulate my breathing better and relax my spinal movement, so it does still fit within that. At this point, it's not yet bringing it all together.
No, because there's other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle around this. So I'm into the CFT. It's the first time I've heard of this biopsychosocial. I thought everything was based on a biological, a medical issue. Running parallel with the CFT approach that I've started to kind of get into. I've obviously looked at the O'Sullivan videos. Yeah. So I'm seeing patients that have had successes from it, and of course, whenever you see these patients who they've read the book and they've suddenly got better, or they've had one exposure to one session with Peter O'Sullivan, and I thought it just don't work like that. It can't work like that, So
did that frustrate you at the time?
It did frustrate me, because you see people turning up to a seminar, and then you see the big evangelistic type of, right, so and so is going to come onto right, bend forward, and they have a quick 20-minute session, and then suddenly they're all better.
Right. Yeah.
I thought it can't work like that. It can't work like that. So my mindset at that time was still one of, my back's knackered, and I'm going to end up having my back fused. I'm still looking for spinal fusion because I'm still in so much pain all the time, every day, even though I'm trying all this. So, I'm looking at, shall I go back to the surgeon and ask, beg, will you fuse my spine? I attend an explained pain course because I've latched on to this simple way of explaining pain. Right. Thinking, shit, why didn't someone explain to me pain in this way when I first started on my journey? Did it get rid of my pain? No, but what it started to do is develop, my understanding and my confidence to think, do you know what, it might not be so bad down there. This might be a duff signal that's been sent, and therefore, whilst you've probably got to accept that there is a level of pain, it does not stop you doing other things. I attended one of Professor McGill's courses, the Building the Ultimate Back and Rehabilitation to Performance course. That's a 2-day course. So again, I was able to go and listen to Professor McGill, but that really was a step back to how I was. It weren't in my progression to where I am now. I was on an energy blueprint course, which is an American course, and it really takes you through. It's about 8 weeks. It's online, and it's a way of basically ensuring you've got more energy. So it's diet, it's sleep, it's mitochondria health, it's exposure to red light. It's all them really good health habits. Because again, I'm leaving no stone unturned here.
So again, you're going through the menu. You're making sure that you've tried.
Ticked off,
okay.
Yeah. My diet it had gone from almost like an autoimmune diet to I suppose a paleo-ish type
Right.
diet, and I'm still on it. Which, whether I'm in pain or not, that's really helped.
That suits you.
It suits me. Yeah.
Okay.
I've then seen an advertisement for a local chiropractor. I hope your listeners are laughing now because thinking, what the hell, what planet is this guy on?
So you got lured.
Yeah.
You're looking for an advert.
Should write a book.
No, I'm sure we could help.
Chiropractor. So I see the chiropractor advertisement, local chiropractor, and it was for a new treatment where there's some kind of rig, some setup, which is I've always been into exercises that retract the spine. This thought of, if I could retract my spine and create space.
So it's compressed and it needs to be decompressed.
Decompressed, yeah. And I thought, hanging off a bar, get the old inversion boots and try some of that. But anyway, this was slightly different, where it was you're in a rig and it did it. And
is it the IDD? Is it called that?
I don't know what it's called.
Like a traction,
it is a traction
type
thing, yeah.
I think I've seen it advertised.
So I go along for the consultation, and you had to have an X-ray. So did the X-ray, and then what happens is superimposed on the X-ray is like a line that should show your posture correctly, and a line showing where you actually are. So it's inferring that,
right, okay,
because of your posture, you've got the back pain. That's what it's saying. And what the rig can do, what this traction or whatever it's called, after 36 sessions at whatever price, it'll get your posture back, and that will and it'll work.
Right.
That's the unique selling point. So I go along rigorously 3 times a week, and have all the treatment, high expectations. High. I just want to be out of pain, and running parallel with that, I'm still doing all my exercise, and I'm still kind of hunting down and
you're learning simultaneously.
I'm learning.
This is the interesting bit, I suppose, in this is where we have got this overlap, haven't we, between what you've considered a more enlightened sort of approach to the holistic things, but there's also this period of overlap now where you're still in a situation where fundamentally like you say, pursuing structural curative models while still understanding nothing had necessarily changed your mind sufficiently to not be trying these going through the menu, and so that's interesting. Can I before I forget to ask, how much money do you think you've spent on this?
Well, that session alone was £1,000.
Right.
That's just on that chiropractor.
Yeah.
I mean, to see people like the mobility ward people, it was probably a couple of £100 per session. It's even books travelling to London. I mean, the sessions down there were per hour for £150 per hour. Then you got your train journeys. I don't really count, the changes I had to make to my diet and food, etc. But
sure.
It's been thousands, Jack, to answer the question. And I suppose the message that will maybe come out at the end of this conversation is that the price that a patient would be willing to pay to be pain free would be, I'll do anything, and I still will do anything to be pain free, and this is where trust and sitting in front of the right person who can offer you this advice and help can alleviate a lot of what I've been through and what I've been exposed to, and nobody's at fault from it. But it would have saved me money, it would have saved me time, and it would have saved me a lot of worry. And people should not put, as a selling point that this will fix you and this is the treatment that you should be doing. How did they back that up?
Right, yeah.
How do you triangulate things like that? And I'm lucky. I sit on a self-management patient referral group. It's for 6 weeks, and it's for people who suffer from long-term pain and chronic conditions. And there's 18 on the course. I go every Wednesday, and you get people there with COPD, fibromyalgia, all these other conditions, arthritis, back pain, and things like that. And I look around the room, and these are in the system, the passive system. So blindly, the chiropractor, blindly whoever, they're following these treatments, and it's them sort of people that the hard to do pile, the really hard to, that will believe. You're telling me I will believe. I used to believe, and I used to be that person.
Yeah.
Not anymore, thankfully. But again, going back to answer your question, it's costing me a bloody lot of money.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to the so hopefully we've covered that, we've bridged that gap. I want to know what the situation is for how did you come across me? What was that? Because I can imagine how it might happen. It doesn't take many degrees of separation between some of the circles that you're deciding to read within. But I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in, we can speak totally openly about this, and I'd reflect heavily on it. Is that well, let's just start with that. How did you find us?
I would have latched on to people on Twitter who one, talking about back pain, and two, talking about, I suppose, musculoskeletal issues linked to the back. I was on the lookout for progressive people who, I suppose, would challenge the established way of doing things. So they were clearly people who would be following the CFT, would be following the Lorimer Moseley, would be looking at some of the new ways of thinking around these subjects. And you can see that they're out there. Right. I'm going to give you an example. Ben McCormack, and I did actually attend one of his courses, the course I attended, because I seen that he was talking about functional therapeutic movement. So this unanswered question, what's the best exercise for back pain? So I kind of latched on to his work. He's done all the research. You don't have to do it. He just gets all the research and he puts it there and apply it. And somewhere in the ether then, I probably would have started listening to your podcast.
Okay.
So,
was there a gateway podcast, do you recall?
There was a gateway podcast. There was two, and the first one, obviously, Greg Lehman, and particularly because he was a graduate from Stuart Miguel.
Yeah. Okay.
And I saw the link, and I thought, well, if anybody would be able to
reconcile his word, isn't it? Yeah.
And he would then have a big view, I know, on Flexion.
Okay.
Because that was one of my unanswered things. Should I be Flexion? Should I be doing Flexion exercises? I'm sure he'd have a view. So he took me down a bit of a path, and I listened to his podcast. And I think he did two. Did he do two podcasts?
Have them since.
Yeah. And then your podcast, obviously, from your experience with the back.
Right. Okay.
And it was refreshing to listen to a story of an individual who'd been down the same path that me and other sufferers of chronic back pain. And I appreciate that yours wasn't chronic pain. Yours was acute. Sure. I dare say that it's settled down a bit. Yeah. But it was just refreshing to listen to a physio's approach to how the journey went for him, and particularly the person who did the interview was able to unpick and just go a little bit deeper, just like you're doing with me today. So that led me to you, and again, you kind of hit all the hallmarks of, well, that's the sort of physio that I perhaps need to speak to. One, I'd got confidence in what you were saying. Two, nothing to do with the fact that you talk a lot, but it was it was going in the direction that I'd already taken everything anyway, and I needed someone to challenge me in what I was thinking and doing. I needed that challenge, the robust challenge of someone who'd got the horsepower to say, well, why are you doing that? Or stop doing that and take this approach.
Okay.
And we met up and you kindly, started to help me out. It was about 4 or 5 months ago.
I bet it's nearly 6,
now. 6 months. It's
December.
December.
Crazy, isn't it?
December
it's beginning of December, wasn't it? One of the things that I was conscious of at the time, and to your memory too, was that I immediately, when hearing parts of your story on email, and then I was conscious to not be another chapter, another person that overpromised and underdelivered, and you'd encountered the products of the podcast and the company and what we try and stand for. But I was very conscious of that. Now, I want you to be totally honest in saying that whilst an ongoing journey together on this part, but did I end up, or have we succumbed to that? And if not, then what's different? And this isn't me trying to get you to fill an advert. Be as open, as honest as you can be.
It did reinforce to me some of my own thought process, my own beliefs. And again, I think I said this earlier, and you must have come across this in patients, and certainly your listeners will, in terms of like the storytelling that a patient will do continuously about what's happening to them. And you immediately debunked some of the thoughts I was having around pain. And I remember I was explaining to you that, and this is probably not in the first meeting, this is probably a little bit later.
Sure.
It had come to about the January, and after all I've been trying, I was still really struggling with pain every day, relentless. But still trying to do stuff, and not give in to it. But I was struggling to the point where I had to go back to the doctors and suddenly say to a GP, I can't do this anymore. I've tried everything. And almost waving the flag, so a doctor say, oh, well, what we'll do is we'll send you back to a surgeon and see what they say. Even though I knew, because again, I'd done my research and I'd read quite a few books on surgical outcomes for spinal fusion, including the percentage of success, it makes it worse or no change. I'd read the work of David Hanscom, he's an American surgeon, and he wrote a good book, Back in Control. So I kind of knew that you're going down the same path again. But what happened from that conversation then was two things. I suddenly get offered help from about three or four other sources to help me deal with this pain. The term that I now call a strong therapeutic alliance, which to me means that I've got other people helping me, this person in pain. Second thing, I was offered an MRI scan. And again, my new learning was, quite rightly, don't have an MRI scan, no need, unless it's a red flag issue. And he offered it me, and I thought, I'm going to take this MRI scan, because I think that it's got better. I think that whatever damage was down there, as in the bulge or prolapse that's impinging on the nerve and all that sort of thing, I actually think some of the exercise that I've been doing, and I was doing loads by then, including the wonderful Jefferson curl. I'm following a gymnastics program online, so I'm doing loads of undoing stuff.
You're enjoying it.
I'm enjoying it. I was really into it, you know.
I remember you saying to me at that point, sorry to interject, but it was like, I remember you asking whether I thought it was a good idea, and I definitely, you were looking to see, you thought you felt it would be a useful debunking exercise in a sense. I remember you sent me a message saying that this was, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you think? And I remember thinking this is a very different framing of why to have a scan.
Yeah.
And so, and also just your visit to the GP in January, you laid the cards on the table and were asking for help, not just in a medical sense as well.
No.
And it's like, was that the first time that you'd reached out to, say, the medical world, to say, I can tell that some of these things are bigger than structures, they're affecting my emotions, my mood, things like that, and anxieties?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is the reason why I'm sat here, because when a patient like me sits in front of a physiotherapist like you or your listeners, is this going beyond the competencies of me as a physiotherapist to help this individual? This individual is Adrian Mcgregor at the moment, talking about chronic pain, because he's talking about he can't sleep. He's talking about he just mood. There's something not quite right here. Anxiety raging. But I've got back pain, but I've got terrible anxiety. I was okay because I know all the alarm signals. I know the alerts, what pain does to you. I'm very fortunate. I've done my homework. So it's understanding what this all means and how can it be worked out. And quite rightly, you go to your GP, and on this occasion, I got quite a lot of help, which I'm still having now. I mean, I even got referred, because I'd been in the military. The military helped me out, and they've got for current veterans and current people who are serving and veterans. It's the Veterans Mental Health Transition Intervention and Liaison Team, and they were put in touch with me, and I had meetings with them, and they helped me out. So I've gone from I can sort this out myself. I used to be in the Royal Marines, and I can do anything. To I can't do it on my own anymore.
Right.
But what you did, and we're answering your question now, is that you well challenge that decision, or you that one you provide reassurance that I think this is a really good idea, this is. And we got the MRI scan, and we both looked at it, because now my knowledge has grown so much that we could even look at our MRI scans and see if it's all right. So not really interested in the report findings, but also what we did, we compared and contrast 2014 MRI to this current one, and we both noticed that we'd got improvements at L5S1, where the bulge had retracted quite a lot. So the actual the space that it was impinging on, thinking that I've already had surgery on it twice, was all reduced. And I remember almost couldn't wait to email say, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing here? This looks better."
When we went through it together, we were both sort of tickled by the idea that it was now seeing something that had structurally improved, but the symptoms hadn't changed. In order to, almost by both levels, then from saying things might structurally worsen and go unchanged, and things can structurally improve and technically and go unchanged, was another nail in the coffin of it being a very narrow, structurally focused.
Yeah, the fear dropped.
Right.
Yeah. So the fear, the emotional baggage on, my back is getting worse and it's only going to lead one way to, more pain, disability, what's the point in carrying on? How risky
a tactic do you feel that was between the two of us? Because had that shown, let's say, I just didn't anticipate it, but it could have shown a subtle decrease or subtle increase in arthritic changes or disc space or whatever it might be, a decrease in disc space, sorry. But let's say it had shown that sort of a 20% step change since your first scan or what have you. Were we towing a narrow line there, which could have then been a negative, or was it something that we could have together put that into its appropriate context and still benefited from that process? How risky do you feel that move was?
It was risky, yeah. It was risky because if you're in a place, in a dark place, the last thing you want is another piece of bad news about your structural problem in your back, because what it does is you think, I just started to believe about this mind-body connection, and that the brain plays an important role all this and explain pain and supercharged. I've read it twice, supercharged, and I'm quite happy with the key concepts of how this should work and what it really is. Oh, it must be a load of rubbish, look, because it's a structural issue.
Right. So you feel you think it could well have sucked you back in?
Sucked me back in, yeah.
Okay.
And at that time and the place, I'd kind of really started to believe in the mind-body connection, and I think it was a little bit risky. But having you on board then just reinforced what I was hoping for, that whatever I was doing, some of the exercises that maybe we can show.
Yeah, we will definitely. Yeah.
As it's a confidence issue, and it's part of that self-efficacy I talked about before. Is that you believe you do believe that you're on the right path here, and it's a highly sensitized system that's keeping that pain up. So going back to what sort of jobs I've done before as a Royal Marine, as a firefighter, I've been in a heavily adrenalised environment. I've almost lived in sympathetic mode for a long time.
Right.
So it's elevated, isn't it? I've been ready for the fight all the time.
And been successful within that as well.
I've lived with a pager.
Reinforced it, hasn't it?
Lived with a pager at the side of my bed, for 15 years, and been tipped out to emergencies, and I've witnessed and been exposed to a lot. It's not a big issue. I don't want a medal. That's life. You get on with it. But the point I'm trying to make is, I've lived in sympathetic mode. I don't even recognise parasympathetic mode.
Yeah. Never been that guy.
No,
yeah.
I've never been that guy. It's like, I've done them emails, so now what's the next job? So then when you start to understand that it might be something to do with that you're in pain, and then you associate the fact that your back looks okay now on an MRI scan, you're back to the old, as a physio, you're brave enough to tell me as a patient, it's not a physical issue. Be prepared for this. It's not a physical issue. It's whatever word you want to use. It's in your brain. It's a mental issue. It's a stress-induced issue. It's anxiety. It's depression. It's something else there might be some sensitivity down there, and that might be central sensitivity, sensitization. But the MRI and everything else is saying, it's not an issue.
So I remember that conversation well between us, and obviously it's one that I have with such a wide variety of people. But you mentioned at the start when you were telling your story, it's like, what was it? I mean, there's a few things, and one I accept being the journey you'd been on. But what was it that stopped you? Let's say, obviously jokingly, but what stopped you swinging for me or showing me the door when I brought those things forward as saying, this is a complex mosaic of different things rather than a thing. What stopped? I'm trying to work out what it was that then brought these things together.
I think the triangulation of many pieces of evidence, I suppose, right. not just the experts, but I kind of already done my homework really, and God, I'm forgetting the girl's name, the American firefighter, Gillette, is it Gillette?
Belton, yeah.
And looking towards people like her, although we've got certain similarities, that we were both firefighters and both had to leave because of injuries. Yeah. The homework's already done for you, really. These sort of people, the Gillette type person.
So the signposting,
it's already there. Now it's you choose to believe and go down that path. So I'd already triangulated, and whatever you were saying to me, it was like in hope that Jack says this, because then it reinforces everything I believe. But it turned out fine, because I genuinely believe that is the reason why I am still in pain. If somebody said to me, Adrian, why are you still in so much pain? I think in a very brief on a page, I can say, this is why I'm still in pain. Do you think you'll ever be out of pain? I think I could respond to that and say, this is the reason why I will be in pain or I won't be in pain. And it's as much simplistic way of explaining that or science that you want, but it's not about me. It's about how can your physiotherapist, how can your colleagues go through that same process when they're, I'm just a physio and you know, I'd rather stick to the tried and tested biological issues. I know a little bit about pain because we did like half an hour at physio, in our physio training, but to be honest, the future role of a physio, it has to start with one, listening a lot, and then moving on to, you know, it's gone beyond the tissue repair phase. Now let me try and explain so you can understand, so you can develop your own active ways of dealing with this while you're still in pain. And me as a physio, along with these other people in our therapeutic alliance, help the Adrian Mcgregors or whichever patient it is. And it doesn't matter if it's back, it could be anything.
And I think that's a useful thing for us to at least, I've got some more questions, but at least finish the story part of this, is that it's interesting that we're not bringing this out to then come to a punchline of saying, and then here I am sat here pain free, or pain-free. So fundamentally it's about your understanding of it. But it's worth probably mentioning to the audience about just the significance of the functional level that you have scaled to. So you regularly play walking football, engage with squash, you've done a triathlon.
Yeah.
So do you feel that your ability and function is contained in that way by your symptoms anymore?
Yeah, I sometimes think there's nothing I can't do. I've got a mindset of turn up. So whatever the event, I like to be able to turn up and do it. So the turn up mentality, if you was to say, Adrian, after this podcast we're going to go for a 5-mile run, well I feel like I've done my bit so I can turn up and do that 5-mile run. If we went to the gym now and said, well, we're going to do some squatting or a quick, high intensity interval training, I'll turn up, I can do it. I'm geared up, I'm ready.
Sure.
You mentioned about walking football, and again for your listeners, if it's for people over 50, but walking football's helped me out so much, really, because I love football and it got me playing football again, and there's loads of clubs around the country. Yeah. It's a low level dose of football, but it's hard. It's a CV workout. It ticks all the boxes. But I tell you what, it's a great social environment, and get to your local club, get on the website. I know that there's European Championships next year and there's World Cup the year after. So walking football's helped me out. Triathlon, again, they're things I thought I'd never be able to do, and I'm a gym bunny. I'm following the gymnastic online program. Gymnastic bodies, which again has helped me with my flexibility. So to answer the question, I'm still in pain. Do I work through the pain to exercise? I've thought about that myself. In other words, because I'm so active, am I making it worse? It's a typical scenario.
Yeah.
We've had these discussions.
Oh, big time! Yeah, that was recurrent. Well, less so recently. But
again, one of your jobs was to you said you reinforce you can't be making it any worse. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do some of the things you're doing, and also it would show up as a flag, either that be a red flag or what other colour flag, but it's not.
Yeah, your symptom behaviour, I think that's one of the terms that we used, was your symptom behaviour didn't suggest that it would be something that you're doing yourself mischief with these things. And so there were various different jigsaw pieces that came into play that helped with that for sure. And did I ever, I keep using this word like I'm copping out, but did I ever succumb to being another confusing voice within the machine? Because I want you to have space, even on this show, to tell me that and to confront me with my mistakes.
No, well, the answer is no. I was fortunate that you'd been through a similar episode yourself, so you could understand. But you didn't take me down any blind alleys. You didn't confuse me. I wasn't confused, thinking, he's giving me a mixed message here. Is he does he think that's a good idea, that particular exercise, or not? I think I'm going back to your, and I find this quite useful. You try to unbreak some of my chains of very mechanical, the way I sit, bend, etc. And do exercise that you just enjoy. So it was reinforcing. It doesn't matter what exercise you do, it's something that makes you happy, gives you pleasure. But then even we did the, and I'd not played squash before, but it didn't start off with squash. It started off with chalk on the wall, numbers, do a video, right, number one, and going for number one, and it was at different heights.
That's right, yeah.
There's probably a name for it. And I started to do that in my garage. Again, it sounds like one of these Rocky films again, where you start and then the next thing you've got that grey tracksuit on sprinting up the steps.
Montage.
Yeah. With all the kids following you running up the steps. But it started off like that. Before then I started to play squash. So it made total sense to... the start of the journey was grooving a pattern. You took me on a journey of ungrooving the pattern,
liberating your movement,
liberating the movement. Which, I get that. That was more a bit of CFT, a bit of everything else, but it was the prescription that I needed at the time, and it's you could only do that by you've not got the straitjacket where I work for the NHS as a physio, and I've only got 20 minutes allocated to you. And then I'm on to my next patient. And I've got another 15 in the day. I'm not quite sure that person would be able to... he wouldn't be my go-to physio.
Yeah.
Because they would not be able to go into the levels that necessarily could help me and fix me. You'd have to see me 50 times at 20 minutes a time. It needed... The complexity was that it needed a lot of alternate methods and a lot of listening.
Okay.
Because all patients are different, and I'm. Some would say, well, no, you're no different from your average back sufferer, and it's a label that I don't really agree with. Because of the history of the person, and again we're going back to where I started.
Sure.
The exposure that I've had to life is going to be different maybe from someone else, and it's them bits that need to be factored into. They call it the biopsychosocial model. I'm sure somebody owns that model. I should keep saying it.
TM. Yeah.
But there's certain parts of that are more relevant to me than there would be someone else.
Of course, and that individualised approach is certainly what you sound like. What sounds like resonated with you most. I want to touch on that you've just said. Do you think that you are representative? Your story, your experience is representative, or is it an anomaly? Are we taking this narrow case and suggesting that it's an interesting story for us to all learn from? Because I think that some people might listen in and one of the ways in which they could ignore it, I hope they don't, but one of the ways in which they could is just to suggest, that's just a once in a blue moon occasion where someone's had a tumultuous experience with the profession, with the industry at large, and they've had mixed messages, and that's not representative. What's your position on that?
Well, I mentioned earlier I sit on a self-care management group of like-minded people with various conditions. And the spectrum of self-management, self-efficacy, these are right at the bottom end. But as I'm listening to them, they're no different from me. It's just that for some reason they're willing to accept a passive way of dealing with it, and particular medication,
right,
and particular around lack of exercise because of fear of, I can't do it because it'll hurt me back or me need more. So it's not my case is not unusual. The unusualness of me is the approach that I've taken to find the solution.
Yeah.
Now, you might say I'm an absolute rare beast. There's not many people that you come across that's been willing to do this. If you've got the finances and the time, you can do it. And hey, I retired, didn't I? So I ended up being retired, and I've got a bit of time on my hands.
Sure. So circumstances.
Dictate, but yeah, I would say it's not unusual, and that many patients will be experiencing and going through the same journey. It's just that how much willpower, words like willpower, have they got to take a grip of it themselves and find out and question and try things, because eventually you get your breaking point. I mean, I had my breaking point a few months ago. Even me, everything I've done to think, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation, and then how do you pick yourself back up to think, well, yeah, stop feeling sorry for yourself, get up the day after, try something else.
Sure.
So I don't think I'm an anomaly. It's just that my approach is a rare.
But you were like, you do seem to accept the fact that the educational journey you've most recently gone on, which has helped you that's going to help you help others, is the bit where your understanding now of neuroplasticity. The fact that you sit with me a few weeks back when we had a consultation and we're discussing the Lancet papers and things like that, is that you're accepting that bit's the unique bit.
It is, and if you didn't ask me, I'll tell you now. So give me one thing that you've learned throughout this whole journey that probably would have made life a lot easier. And if somebody had sat down to me and explained to me about pain, I wouldn't even be sat here with you now, Jack.
No, yeah.
Why didn't someone, does it matter who? Could it be the GP? Could it be the person who went to see the consultant at chronic pain management?
Yeah.
Could it be the surgeon? Could it be the chiropractor? Could it be the physio? And do you know why I don't think they explained to me about pain? Because they weren't capable of explaining to me about pain. They probably knew a little bit, and they probably knew certain phrases and an old school way of thinking about pain, but they couldn't articulate about pain in the context of what's happened to me and the journey that I've been on and why I might still be in pain. Oh, and you're not an anomaly. Most people with persistent pain follow the same path. The only thing that deviates off in terms of the psychosocial model, there might have been more stresses in your life which has led to the exacerbation of your conditions, etc.
Sure.
I don't want to know the finite details about it. I'd rather know what's these other things that can alleviate it by getting better sleep.
Sure.
If somebody said to me two years ago, meditation will probably help you fix this, I'd have said, what planet are you on?
Yeah. So
sitting there for 10 minutes just like tree hugging.
But once you understood the context, those pieces came more in play. And I remember that. I remember even in this short time that we've been working together, that there were some things that crept up on your radar when things got explained in a more thorough way.
Yeah,
it wasn't like anyone was shoehorning them in. No. It was like you brought them forward from the periphery, because it's like, oh, that might be how that incorporates. Yeah. And I remember that being an interesting. If I reflect on my experience working with you, that was one of the things that was most interesting to me, was that, like, if someone held a gun to my head and said, you've got to infer suggestions of a treatment plan that's actually quite rigid, say someone insisted on me that I'd be a bit more dictating to you as to what we needed to do, some of the things that I would have gone to if forced to, with very little delay, got brought forward by you, which was really interesting, and for me to like realise that there'll be times where, as you just, I talk plenty, particularly in this context, and it's more that given chance, those things could emerge, and how much better they are if they emerge from understanding rather than to be dictated down from a therapist.
Yeah, absolutely.
You were recently at the Big R's event in Birmingham as a delegate. What was your experience of the event, if you don't mind me asking? Because that was very much me with my interprofessional hat on.
Yeah. Food was good.
Food was good. Yeah. Glad some of it were good.
Is that the sort of thing you're interested in?
It can be.
I thought it was quite interesting when they gave the introductions and somebody said, the table of speakers, that they're going to stick to 5 minutes, and you went up first. I remember sitting there thinking, someone's having a laugh. 5 minutes.
I didn't know.
I don't think so. I think the people. I was sat on a table, and when we was all talking, they was almost shocked that I was a patient sat there on the table. You know, almost like, who's this person? A patient sat here. And I'm not knocking anybody that like you that's organised it, but it just needs to be developed a lot more in terms of they can give a lot of steering and help towards any reforms that we're considering.
Exactly.
Because, and I'm not saying I'm an educated patient. I'm just saying most of it I found out the hard way. But that was quite interesting, and it was quite refreshing because they was very welcoming to me as well. I use the term "they sat around my table." You know, if I had to start the journey again, what would a good physio look like? You know, how do you when you go and you're looking for a physio? I need a physio to help me with that.
Yeah.
How do you really know? And I'm not talking about he's got accreditations, he's got all these names and letters behind his name, etc. But what does a good physio look like? And any reform to me and in the future would be to make life easier. As I say, I'm not quite sure if I had to start again, how would I know which one's the best one to go to? I did lots of research. I ended up with you. It could have been anybody. I mean, I ended up going to America to Kelly Starrett as well, and it's difficult, and it shouldn't be that difficult. You know, a typical NHS patient will be referred to the NHS. Will they be getting the right person to help fix them? I don't think they will be.
So you've experienced a wide variety and variation, and so do you feel that as tidying that up would make patients like yours' lives better?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I called it let's call it the Charlie effect. The event I went to, I thought about it as the Charlie effect. Yeah, and let's say Charlie is a physio. I made it up. Yeah, or I might not have made it up. So Charlie's a physio. He's the sort of physio that I went to see when I first started, and he's hardworking, he's conscientious, he's intelligent, he's on the ball, he's ticking all the boxes, but he's just working all day as a physio, and if the patients are in, like I was, and the patients are out, and he ain't got the time for some of the things that you like to do, a lot of research and a lot of understanding and a lot of, call it personal development, continuous professional development. And I suppose there's a lot of physios that's listening that can resonate with that. They just work. And
work can be easy.
They don't get paid that well either. And you can understand why the Charlies just get a little bit fed up, and perhaps even some consider leaving the industry, which is really sad. But I'd have to say, the Charlie that I saw at the event, and there was probably a few in the room, they're the person I want to see, because the way they came across and the way they talk, they understand some of the stuff that we're talking about today. They're on it, not just because they're at the big R's, but you can just tell that they are the new school way of breaking down these old traditional ways of thinking and doing things, and not just because they can explain pain, but they can put it back in a way where me as the patient can go away thinking, I feel really assured now that I don't have to panic, that it's all right. And so there was a bit of a Charlie effect as we were sat around me the table.
The Charlies, as you're describing them, are craving a support network and a system that can help them to flourish and to move beyond the old models.
I see when people, if you used to say the big R's, what's all that about, and that. I mean, I've had a quick look. I've read. I see what you're trying to achieve, but more importantly, the Charlies should be continuously mentored. The Charlies should be looking up to leaders like yourself and others. They should be looking up to the questions around how they're continuously developed, to keep them abreast of developments in the physio-musculoskeletal world is so important, so they don't leave or don't go somewhere else. I don't know if physio's a ten a penny, but is there a disparity between NHS physios, people in private practice? Is the quality of it different? I dare say it is. all I know is that I've been exposed to both, and I can tell you there's a massive difference in both.
Yeah, there's variety across all those different sectors and things.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
I point to you, but I know it's not you. You've got a great team, and it has to involve more patients. It has to involve people, not necessarily like me, but people who've been exposed to the system to see how it can all be improved. If I went to a physio in the future, I'd want someone who can articulate all the bits of that model, whatever that model is, and he's not just looking to tell me that I've got gluteal inhibition and we're going to spend the next 6 weeks doing some, single leg squats or whatever, and your core looks a bit weak, so what we're going to move on to now is a series of bird dogs and curl-ups.
It makes me cringe when you recount that, but yeah, there were only 2 patients in the room. One had to leave a little sooner than you did, and I didn't get a chance to introduce you to her. But fundamentally, of those, it's hard for us to get patients in the room, and I need to make sure that I keep working on that process. And we've run by some of the materials and telling more patients about it behind the scenes, which is useful. But I certainly will be taking that feedback on board, and I doubt there's anyone, especially those that have listened to this and those that met you on the day, that would disagree with that analysis. I think that you're right. I think we need to make sure that the patient voice is heard and that their experiences of this variation, as you're describing it, and the complex ways in which it's touched your life, both for good and bad, are accounted for and understood properly. Because if we don't learn from history, then I'm worried about where we could lurch towards in the future. The next chapter on that journey, if we think about the big R's, is that you'll be contributing to our session called Reforming Patient Engagement at the Reforming MSK Practice Conference in October 5th and 6th. What do you hope is discussed, and what does an MSK industry that listens appropriately to the patient voice as you've described it look like if it was to reform as I'm suggesting it should?
You ask all the tough questions, don't you?
That's right. I had to come up with one.
I'm just a patient, Jack.
Sorry, yeah. Feel free. Just say, I don't know, get lost. That's horrible.
I'm starving.
Yeah, same here.
I want to go to the gym.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Do you know, a physio, I've touched on this earlier, a physio, the role has to be far greater than a fixer of a biomechanical issue. And I said about this, they're part of a therapeutic alliance where, a person, individual, has got persistent pain, but this team of people can help. It can only be a team of people. So the new role of a physio, he can be more than just that fixer of a mechanical issue. They're going to have to dip into areas of psychology and tough questions around, well, talk to me about your social life and what you've had a fallout with the missus, and and start to link these other parts of the jigsaw puzzle up. And,
right.
And if they think, well, that's not our role, that's somebody else's, I don't think it can be, because there's an awful lot of trust will be put in a physio that can temper that, it's not just a physical issue, there are other issues as well. So, a wider role.
For sure.
Physios, I would think their number one role is to teach the patient the self-efficacy. This is how you will fix yourself. I am a facilitator. I can assess you. I can make sure it's not something serious. I can show you some exercises. But how do you get patient from that position to the person achieving the goals in life, whatever that is? Picking the grandkids up, doing a triathlon, playing walking football for Wales, maybe not. Let's use the I'm an ex-firefighter, so let's use the greasy slippery fireman's pole. Chronic patients at the bottom of the pole. When he's in chronic pain, he's trying, or she's trying to just climb up that slippery pole. The physio's got to show him a way round. So go up the stairs, do another route.
Build them a ladder.
So the intervention between both is your job. And there's a lot of tools that talk about, how do you develop a mindset to do that? How do you develop willpower, self-efficacy? all these other bits like the diet, the sleep, the lifestyle, exercise, etc., and really explaining about pain. They're all additional tools that you might have to up your game. Someone's got to up the game and do it. Otherwise, we're just going to be in the same predicament we're in now, where I've been in the pain medical business since the day I went into the GP, and I've been in, out, looking for an answer, and I've ended up coming to a physiotherapist who's finally explained it to me. That's not you alone, Jack. That's me finding other physios.
Yeah.
But you've been the icing on the cake, where physios have been the ones that have unlocked it for me. You ain't a consultant expert at the pain clinic. Physios.
Yeah.
That is the belief that I've got in the system. That they are probably the best place to explain this wider issue of it's not just a tissue, it's not just a disc issue, it's other things in your life.
So you don't think it's overly ambitious for me to try to say that physiotherapists can provide a leadership role?
They have to. It's not if and when, and they have to. And if that goes back to the training that they receive, to the way they're accredited, to the exams, to the syllabus. I don't know what's on your current syllabus, for explaining pain, but
Oh, you're smirking. The voice of the microphone can hear.
You should all get a free copy of the Supercharged book, because that explains it in a way that's very simple. And again, I'm not advocating that book or anything, but that's...
Fair enough.
I'm trying to think of anything else. I talked about the physio should always be brave enough to tell a patient it's not a physical issue. But again, it's going back.
That bravery thing you've mentioned a few times, and I think it's bravery without being brash, I suppose. When I've been thinking about it, because you don't want a new dogma to emerge because that would be still done badly. That could still be a therapist telling a patient what things are or aren't. I suppose it's funny, isn't it? Because I totally agree with you, don't get me wrong, but it's like a big conundrum to me, trying to work out how can we make sure that we don't lurch towards just a new form of dogmatism.
Well, I made the point about pain. A physio should see the patient in terms of the pain and the context of the person. So it's the pain and context specific. And only by going into and listening to the stories of the patient that my life journey, I didn't have any, but if I'd have had adverse childhood events, the ACEs, even before I reached the age of 16, when I then went on to commando course, I told you a couple of things that happened to me, I've not mentioned anything else, but then I moved on to the fire service, where I will have encountered lots of issues to do with stress, exposure, traumatic issues. So everything's context specific, and the physio, they must unlock that. It is part of the pain journey.
They can't account for it if they don't elicit it in the first place.
Now they can dismiss it. It's not relevant. I'll give you an example. I've been for CBT, and I saw the lady from the military. And quickly they both identified that I'd not got post-traumatic stress. Now, you're sat looking at me now thinking, well, where's this going? And what's the relevance of this? But I've probably got the hallmarks of somebody who could have post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen so much death, and particularly in the fire service, and things that most people would find unbelievable. But it's part of the job. But what happened is, luckily, every time one of these events happened, I dealt with it at the time. Now, that could be through debrief, through decompression activities, where you get around and you talk through the event. So in other words, I left it at work.
Yeah.
We used to have bars on fire stations, so we'd go to a fire, and you'd see a fatality, a death that wasn't pretty, and you'd come back, then the bar was open, you'd be at the bar at work, you'd have a drink, you'd talk about it, forgotten, it was dealt with at the time. So I have not got post-traumatic stress disorder. But what if a patient comes into you, Jack, tomorrow, And he says, well, I'm ex-military, I did 5 years in the parachute regiment and blah, blah, blah. I would already have an alert on, if I was you, to think, right, let's just forget the back pain at the moment. Tell me a bit more about some of the exposure you've had to stressful events. So you're doing a lot of linkages that are in areas that might be uncomfortable for you?
Sure, because that's an interesting thing with PTSD as well, isn't it? That they have to draw a threshold somewhere with regards to what constitutes it as a umbrella diagnosis and what doesn't. And so in that situation, reflecting on not just what happened, but also the subsequently what happened, as in what mechanisms were in place for you to deal with those situations. So, absolutely, and also there's been stories that can be told where some of the stressful circumstances, even within the journey of treatment and care, can sometimes be quite traumatising to people that feel very vulnerable. So there's lots of ways in which we need to better understand, like you described it, the mind-body connection. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or tell the listeners before we wrap up?
No, I wanted to thank you for inviting me here today and to the events, the Big Eyes events, and if any of your listeners, I mean, I'm sure they're bored to death now listening to me.
Doubt that.
If any of them want to reach out to me and if they think that I can help, I use the word help because that's what I'm trying to do, help others. They can contact me, and I'd be quite happy to talk to them or whatever they want, and I'm sure I'll see some of them again at the October event. At
the conference, absolutely, I mean, we're thinking up lots of different ways in which we can do that, and we'll liaise with you about how we can best integrate your voice and your story into various different parts of the event. Also, we'll make sure that your Twitter handle and if you'd like, your email address can be made available to the appropriate people. But I thank you so much, and I don't want you to take for granted the fact that the opportunity you're giving people to hear this story, and I thank you for your patience and your willingness to help us to try and change things for the better based on some of the experiences you've had, good, bad and ugly. So I think it's a very brave thing you're doing, and I really do thank you a lot.
No problem. Can we go to the gym now, please?
Let's do it. Gym time. Gym time. See you later. Last thing you want from me is a waffly outro. So, at Adrian 305-330 to find Adrian on Twitter, and to hear more from him, of course, you can get in touch via us if you want his email address or to chat to him about these things in more detail. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from him, especially at the conference. Hashtag Dear Student Me is what we're talking about at the top of the show. Hashtag The Big R's, of course, the Big RS, to keep an eye out on that project as it develops, which involves going to reform.physio /community, which will be up and running soon, to keep in touch with what we're getting up to there and to get involved. It's a fully transparent, fully inclusive network of people and community of practice that we're trying to develop, so keep an eye out for that, and hopefully we can put a library and forum together, which is launching this week, in fact. And then www.buytickets.at, so AT/reformingMSK is the direct link to the conference website. 5th and 6th of October. We look forward to seeing you in Manchester, and keep an eye out all over social media as we bring you more and more of the programme and the headline acts as we put it together. All that's left for me to do is say that you've been listening to the Physio Matters podcast, discussing physio matters, because physio matters. Bye for now.